excited to share this message with you guys this morning. If you are half as excited to hear it as I am to preach it, we're going to have a great morning. It's going to be awesome. David, would you do me a huge favor and bring the clear table up here, if you don't mind? So, I'm 39 years old. You're going to hear me say that a lot because in about 3 months I won't be anymore. So I'm going to just use it. It's not going to have anything to do with anything like, oh, it's not hot anymore. Well, as a 39-year-old, I know a little thing about weather. I'm just going to throw it out there because soon I'm going to have to say I'm 40. So I'm going to use that a lot. 39 years old, and I'm sitting passenger, right? Sitting shotgun, which doesn't happen a lot in my life anymore. Driving all the time, and I'm sitting passenger, and I'm having these thoughts in my head, like I am a really good passenger. Like at 39 years old, that's what I'm hanging my hat on, right? See how I did that, like 39? 39 years old, I'm hanging my hat on, I'm a really good passenger. I'm gonna tell you 2 turns before that turn comes where you're going, so that you will know at all times how you should be driving in this area that you're not familiar with. I'm a great passenger. I love it. My wife would say, you're not a good passenger though, you're a good backseat driver, which isn't a good backseat, like whatever. I'm a great passenger because I'm letting the driver know what's happening. See, oftentimes, we're like, God, if you would just let me know what's going on. God, just let me know so I know where to turn. Let me give you a hint. God is not in the passenger seat. Let me make it real easy for you right now. He's not in the passenger seat telling you where to go. He's driving the ship. And the sooner that I can get on board with that, the easier things get. God is not my passenger. God does not need my direction. God gives me direction, but he does not need my direction. We're going to look at this in this series. We're going to look at this man, Joshua. We're going to look at Joshua. We're going to pick up at the end of chapter 5 of Joshua, and we are going to go into chapter 6. And here's this man who's about to have an encounter with the Lord. This man, Joshua, this man who shares the same name as Jesus. In the Hebrew, it's Yeshua. That is this, Joshua. In English, we call him Joshua. Same name as Jesus. He's about to lead the children of Israel into victory in the promised land. They have just crossed the Jordan River. Here they are. And he's up there by himself one night, I imagine looking at Jericho. Jericho, the first of 10 cities, the first of this fortified city that they were going to have to go into the land and conquer. Joshua is there, he's looking, and he has this encounter. He has this meeting with this man in Joshua chapter 5, verse 13. Joshua chapter 5, verse 13, we're going to read through 15. And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped and said to him, what does my Lord say to his servant? Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy. And Joshua did so. Picture with me Joshua called to lead the whole nation of Israel, probably, 2 or 3 million people at this time. Joshua on a mission. And if you're like me, when you're on a mission, it's all about business. And we get down to business, and oftentimes I take my business and my plans and I take them before the Lord and I say, Lord, bless this. Who hasn't done that? You real spiritual people out there, I commend you. But like me, I take my plans and I put them before the Lord and I say, Lord, bless them. That's exactly what Joshua was doing. He said, Lord, are you for us? Well, he didn't say Lord. He didn't know he was Lord yet. He said, are you for us or are you for our adversaries? And I love how the Lord answers. I love what he says, no. No. How often I say, Lord, bless this. Lord, come on board with what I'm doing. And God says, no. What I've come to realize in my 39 years of life is that God does not come to take sides. He comes to take over. He does not come to take my side. He comes to take over my life. So many men and women of God have to come to the realization of this. John, who later titled himself the Beloved, which is awesome, earlier was titled Son of thunder. Because he was like, Jesus, I just imagine like the disciples are out doing the thing, and he just comes back to the Lord probably like out of breath. He's like, Lord, this just happened. Like these guys, they were talking about you, but they weren't with us. Don't worry, Lord, I handled it. They weren't in our little group, so I told them to stop. They're not on our side, Lord. Jesus said, you don't know what spirit you're of, John. If they're not against us, they're for us. It's not about taking sides. It's about the Lord coming and taking over. Here, Joshua, he has these plans, and he's like, this is what must happen, right? I mean, any spiritual man has to like start moving forward, right? So Joshua has these plans, and God just shows up, and he's like, no, new plan, Joshua. I'm going to tell you what it is. And some of you are like, yeah, I really want an encounter with the Lord because this situation is coming up and I have this problem, and I would really like some insight to kind of get me past this confusion. Well, let me let you know. When God comes and shows up and gives you an encounter, oftentimes it still doesn't make sense afterwards. Oftentimes, I have an encounter with the Lord, and I'm sometimes still confused at the end. Oh, he's going to bring peace and victory, but making sense of it all? That's actually not promised. We're going to get into this story in Joshua chapter 6, and you can say, oh, that's a great story. When they marched around Jericho and the walls fell, that's a great story. Not really. It's kind of ridiculous if you think about it. It's kind of like, we're just going to march around. Like, if you look at it strategically, it's ridiculous. And God often calls us to do things that don't make sense at all. If you're in a situation that makes no sense at all, you're like, yes, I need an encounter with the Lord. Don't plan on making sense out of it. Don't plan on understanding, but plan on getting peace and plan on getting victory. That is promised. Here we see Joshua, he's like, okay, he has a take your shoes moment off. We talked about that quite at length. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago in Encounter Part 1. I encourage you to go back and look at it if you missed it. Joshua, he has this take your sandal off moment, and then the Lord gives him direction. And I want to read Joshua chapter 6. I want to read verse 1 through 20. So buckle up. We're going to chew through this, and then we're going to talk about it. If you don't have your Bibles, we've got a Sky Bible right there. Encourage you, read along. Joshua chapter 6, verse 1 through 20. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war, and you shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. Then it shall come to pass, when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him. Then Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let the 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord. And so it was, when Joshua had spoken to the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord advanced and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests and blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Now Joshua had commanded the people, saying, you shall not shout or make any noise with your voice, nor shall any word proceed out of your mouth until the day I say to you, shout, then you shall shout. So he had the ark of the Lord circling the city, going around it once, and then they came into the camp and lodged in the camp, and Joshua rose early in the morning. And the priests took up the ark of the Lord. Then 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew with the trumpets, and the armed men went before them. But the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. And the 2nd day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp, and thus they did 6 days. But it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early, about the dawning of the day, and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. On that day only they marched around the city 7 times. And the 7th time it was, when the priests blew the trumpets, and Joshua said to the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Now the city shall be doomed by the Lord to destruction it and all who are in it. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And you, by all means, keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest you become accursed when you take of the accursed things, and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron are consecrated to the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted with the priest, blew the trumpets, and it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. We have the benefit of knowing the end of the story. We have the benefit of knowing that the walls fall down. But you're in a situation right now where you may have a promise from the Lord, but you can't as easily turn the page and see those walls come down. You can't as easily say, I know the end. I mean, intellectually, theologically, we can say yes, but emotionally, in my heart, what I'm actually feeling is far from that of turning the page and seeing victory and walking straight ahead. A lot of us are in a situation where we are just like Joshua, and we're looking at this daunting task, this daunting battle, and we're looking down upon it. And we're seeing what Joshua saw. He saw the city of Jericho securely shut up. He saw the city of Jericho, this first battle that they were supposed to face, he saw them securely shut up. See, we may intellectually realize that the battle is the Lord's, but he has brought us to a position where we see there is no way in and there is no way out of it. Anyone else there? Anyone else been to a place like that? If not, the Lord's going to send you to a place like that, where there's no way in and there's no way out. And I love it in here. It's like doubly redundant. You're like, Terry, that's redundant. Exactly. It says, now Jericho was securely shut up. That word is segar, and he uses it twice. Now Jericho was segar. Not like cigar, but like segar. It means shut up, shut up. Some of you have heard that before, but that's not the same context. It's tight, it's closed, redundantly telling them there is no way in. Maybe you've got a family member where you just cannot reach into them. Maybe you've got a prodigal. Maybe you have a relationship where there's nothing you can do about it. Maybe it's financial. I don't know. There's something where the Lord's brought you to this battle and there's no way in and there's no way out. And he brings you to a place where you can just look at it. And you've been looking at it for 1 day or 5 days or a decade. I don't know what it is, but the Lord has brought Joshua, brings I to this place where it's impenetrable, where victory seems fleeting. And he brings us to this place, and as Joshua is looking at it, it's securely shut up. He makes mention of it. He's like, wow, there's no way in there. Notice what God tells him in verse 2. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand. Now, if I were Joshua, I'd be like, yes, Lord, that's exactly what I was thinking. It clearly looks like victory, Lord. No, it doesn't. Oftentimes the Lord says, look at this victory. And we're like, what are you talking about? Victory. There's no way in and there's no way out. But God says, see. That word see, to look, to perceive, behold. God's basically saying, behold, look at it, Joshua. Isn't it beautiful? Look at the victory, Joshua. Isn't it amazing? Joshua, look, victory. Here's what I realize. I do not need my vision for the battle. I need the Lord's vision. I don't need my vision for the outcome of what I think is impossible. I need the Lord's vision for the battle. I overlay my problem with the promise of God, and I say, God, give me your vision. When you say, my God shall supply all of your need according to his riches and glory, God, I'm going to overlay that over my problem. When you say, I'm working all things together for good for those that love me and are called according to my purpose, I'm laying that over my problem. I'm saying, God, give me your vision for my problem. Exchange that for my vision. See, a lot of people have a hard time when you take them into a dump of a house, getting vision for what it could look like if you remodel it. A lot of people can't go in and see the vision because there is something that is a dream and a vision killer, aka a budget. Most people cannot see, oh, we can make this thing beautiful because like what most of us see is just dollar signs and we can't look past it. Let me let you know, in God's vision, there's no budget. He pays it all. It's all on his account. It's all from him and he owns everything. A budget does not stop my God. He looks at it and he says, can you get my vision for it? Can I show you what this victory looks like? He takes Joshua right there and he says, see what it looks like? See, Joshua? Can you get the vision? Look at it, believe it, Joshua. And here's what he tells him to do. Verse 3, you shall march around the city. All your men of war, you shall go around the city once, and this you shall do 6 days. Notice what he tells Joshua. What you're going to do, you're going to gather up, and you're going to march around the city for 6 days. And the law, Moses tells children of Israel, ordained by God, how many days were they to work? 6. You are to work 6 days, and on the 7th day you shall rest. What is he essentially telling him in this battle? That there will be work to do, Joshua. For 6 days you are to do work. You are to trust me until the work is completed, until that 7th day. There is work for you and I to do when the battle is daunting and impossible. And what is that work? To march around in circles. What? To march around in circles? Some of you say, I've been feeling like I've just been walking around in circles for like a month now. It feels like nothing is happening, like I still keep doing the same thing over and over again and nothing is happening. No, listen, child of God, you are marching. What is marching? It's walking with purpose. What is marching? It's walking with discipline, with determination. You're putting one foot in front of the other and you are marching. God calls us to march. What? To just take that next step and take that next step. And what's happening as they are doing that? They're walking around this building or this city and they're getting a real good look at what they can't do. They're getting a first-hand eye view of what is impossible. And what are they called to do? Just take that next step with purpose. Just take that next step with discipline. Just take that next step with determination. God is calling us to walk it out, to circle that city and to look at it. And what it is also doing, it's showing the enemy the army of God. It's showing the enemy that we are marching with God, following directions, having faith in God. It says that this city was securely shut up. Why? Because the nation of Israel. When something seems hopeless like this situation, when something seems unbearable like this situation, what I'm coming to find out, it's because the enemy is actually on the ropes. The more hopeless a situation looks, it's because the enemy is on his last-ditch effort. They're securely shut up. There's no way in. Why? Because God's going to make a way in. When the situation looks even more hopeless, I'm saying, God, give me the faith that the enemy is on the ropes right now. That's what the children of Israel, they're marching around and it's locked up because of it. When you see a hopeless situation, what we are called to do is just take that next step in purpose and determination. Ephesians 4:1, Paul says, therefore, I, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling which you were called. There are times in our walk, and I'm telling you, as a 39-year-old, there are times when it seems like nothing's changing. There are times where you're like, how am I here again? God, why one more time? It's just, I'm going through the motions and it's just circular. And God says, are you going to trust me and you're going to keep walking? Because you do it for 6 days until that work is done. If you feel like it's circular, you're not done yet. If you feel like nothing's changing, you're not done yet. God's still doing a work and he's saying, just march, Terry. Just take one more step. I'm not done with you and I'm not done with the situation yet. March. If you feel like you're going in circles, if you feel like it seems like nothing's happening, I'm telling you, you're in good company. Jesus, as he's hanging on the cross, it would seem that all is lost It would seem like his ministry was a waste. And here you have these Pharisees and these scribes once again, and they're shouting out to Jesus. They're saying, he saved other people. Let's let him see if he can save himself. Jesus went round and round in circles with these Pharisees, with these scribes, and it seemed like nothing was changing. Here they are, they're still mocking him, but it was almost finished. Literally, the work was almost done, as just in a few short hours from that, Jesus would shout like they were called to do. Te tetelestai. It's finished. The work is done. Your work isn't done yet. If it seems like it's just circular and you're in this spot again, you just keep trusting in the Lord. You keep praying, you keep reading, you keep fellowshipping, you keep going to church. God says just take that next step. You keep going, church. You keep walking. It's not done yet. In verse 4 it says that the 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow their trumpets. Notice 7 is a number of completion. 7 is the number of completion, of perfection. God is doing a work, and they work around 6 times until the 7th day. They walk around 7 times, and there's 7 horns being blown. It's this just perfection, completion of the work of God here. You say, I may feel like I'm just marching, but you know what happened every day? The first 6 days, not a word, not a peep, not a shout. They were to march around silently, but there was something going on in the background. There was something going on in those 6 days that they were marching around silently. It says that the priests were blowing the trumpets all 6 days. The priests were blowing the trumpets. I want to think about this for a second. When Israel was ever called to war, they were called to take these silver trumpets, and they were called to blow the trumpets to sound the battle cry. These were not silver trumpets. As they were marching around silently, these trumpets were being blown, but they were these ram's horns. The shofar is what it's actually called. They were not blowing the silver trumpet for war. They were blowing these shofars a little bit differently. The first time we ever in the Bible see a ram's horn, it's in Genesis chapter, I believe, 15, right around it's Genesis chapter 22, verse 13. We see Abraham. He's going up the mountain. He has Isaac with him. Isaac carrying the wood, carrying the fire. God says, take your son, your only son. You're going to sacrifice him. Abraham's going up the mountain. Isaac's with him. Isaac's a bright kid, obviously, and he's like, Dad, we got the fire and we got the wood. Where's the sacrifice? And in Genesis 22, Abraham says, God will provide himself. In your Bible, it says for himself, but that for is italicized. It's not actually in the original. Abraham says, God will provide himself a sacrifice. He takes Isaac to the top. He binds him. He's got the wood. He's got the knife. He's about to sacrifice his son. And God says, Abraham, stop. Don't lay your hand on that lad. And Abraham looks up and he sees a ram. He sees a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. That's the first instance we ever see ram's horn, and it's caught in the thicket by its horns. This picture of Jesus being the substitutionary sacrifice for your and my shortcomings. It was caught in the thicket, something that was overgrown, not tended like man was supposed to tend the garden. Something that wasn't the ram's fault, caught in the thicket. As we're marching around and it seems like nothing's happening, you know what's happening? God, our great high priest, is proclaiming to the world the sacrifice and the truth and the power of Jesus Christ. Even when we don't feel like it, the shofar is being blown, the horn is sounding off that Jesus is good. And so I say, take that next step. Keep walking in trust that God is doing something bigger than you can imagine. He is at work. And you just keep walking. It may seem like circular, but God is doing something. In verse 5, it shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him. Notice that the walls did not fall till a shout of praise went out. We often say, God, do this, and I'll do that. God, come through, and I'll serve you. I'll trust you. I'll whatever it is. And God says, no, you do that first. You trust me first. We say, God, show me and I'll believe. And God says, believe and I'll show you. You take that step of faith first. You shout out, and then the walls fell down. And notice what it says. It'll fall down. And at the end of verse 5, it says, and the people shall go up every man straight before him. As they're walking around 13 times, right, in totality. 13 times around this building. I'm sure like any man or woman, I don't know. I'm sure like any person, as you're walking around this building that's securely shut up, you're trying to figure out a way in. That's what I do. And how many have lost sleep when they're in a stressful situation? What are you doing? You're trying to find a way in, and your mind is zigging, and your mind is zagging, and your mind is thinking, well, if I just do this, and all of a sudden you're mentally juggling all of the situations in your life, and you're trying to just make something work. God's saying you don't need to make something work. You need to keep marching. And when the work is done, who's that? God's work, not mine. When the work is done and the wall falls flat, what does it say? It says there's a straight path. If you're wrestling in your mind and trying to zig and zag and go every which way but straight, God's saying it's not time yet. Just wait until I open up the door for you. Joshua, wait until the walls fall down and it will go straight. Notice this prophecy. It's speaking of Jesus in Isaiah 40. Isaiah 40 verse 1, comfort, yes, comfort my people, says your God. Speak comfort to Jerusalem and cry out to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she has received from the Lord's hand double for all of her sins. Verse 3, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be exalted and every mountain and hill brought low. The crooked places shall be made straight and the rough places smooth. We can proclaim that and we can claim that as victory, that God, you're going to make the crooked places straight. But what does it take? It takes you and I just marching one foot after the other. God's going to make it straight, but what do? I march seemingly around in circles in the meantime, right? Like it's the same thing. Again, nothing's happening. God says, just march. Take that foot with purpose and take that next step. March. God's going to make the crooked places straight. He opens up a door for them. And during those first 6 days, what were they called to do? They're called to march, and they're called to be quiet. I think all of us sometimes are given the ministry of silence, and few of us walk in that ministry. Terry, that's offensive. Yeah. Sometimes. All of us at a certain point are given the ministry of closing our mouths. And oftentimes I don't. And then I get into trouble. And I'm like, can I just take that back? You know? I know where these shoes have been. I don't want to put my feet in my mouth anymore. But I do it. Job had comforters. Not so much, but he had comforters that came and sat with them silently for a while. And at that point, they were good comforters until they opened their mouth. In the situation where 6 days of walking around in circles, 6 days where the work doesn't make any sense, 6 days where it's like, why, God? When you're in that position, I encourage you to take a step of faith and close your mouth. And just say, Lord, I don't understand, so I'm going to be quiet about it. I don't understand, so I'm going to be silent because I don't want to spread a rumor about my king that he is not good. I don't want to spread a rumor about my God that maybe he doesn't know what he's doing. That's what I feel like. That's never true. I'm not going to spread a rumor about Jesus that he doesn't love me, and so I'm just going to close my mouth for a little bit. There are times in our life where we're called to the ministry of hush, right? Just walk it out. Just, okay, God, I don't understand. And I'm just going to walk and I'm just going to trust. 6 days of just silence and confusion. They do it. They walk. We have the benefit of knowing that the walls fall down. But imagine those walking around like, gosh, I wish Moses was leading us. What in the world is Joshua thinking? We're just marching around in circles. I wish Moses were leading us. Maybe a sea would part in front of us, something. Marching around. That's why God told him to be quiet. He said, you're not going to understand, so just be quiet. You're not going to say anything good, so just be quiet. At the end here, at the end, he says the walls are going to fall, you're going to walk in, it's going to be victorious. And I tell you, the same is true with your life. That situation, God's going to come through. You keep walking, you keep trusting. By all the power vested in me with this word of God right here, I'm telling you that God is going to come through and he's going to make a way. That's who my God is. That's who this God is that we speak of, that we look at. And then he gives this warning. He says, I'm going to come through. It's going to be amazing, and it's not going to be about you and your people, Joshua. It's going to be about me. I'm going to come through. And then there's a warning. He says, when you come into the land, when you get in there, verse 18, you by all means keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest you become accursed. When you take of the accursed things and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble it, but all the silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron are consecrated to the Lord, and they shall come into the treasury of the Lord. God says, when you come in to physical, visible, tangible victory, when it's just right there and you're walking in all of the promises, you honor me with what I've given you. You honor me with it, Joshua. You're going to come in and you're going to receive all these spoils. And he says, don't touch it, Joshua. In Deuteronomy chapter 26, God says, when you come into the land, all of the first fruits, you give it to me. The first fruits when you come into the land, it is the tithe. That's what Moses was telling them, Deuteronomy 26. As they're coming into the land, they come to Jericho. Jericho was the first of 10 cities. What is God saying here? He says, you're going to walk in my promises. You're going to walk in my victory. And I'm asking, Joshua, I'm asking children of Israel, that you give me the first fruits of it. It's mine. Otherwise, it's going to become a curse on you. God here, he's warning them specifically about taking what is not theirs. And I'm coming to find out as I'm looking this, as I'm reading this, as I'm checking it out, I'm realizing that the first part of my income has strings attached to it. The first part of what God gives me has strings attached to it. And on the end, there's like two little hooks. And if I keep it for myself, one of those little hooks is greed. And the other one of those little hooks is self-reliance. And if I keep it to myself, it makes its way into my heart and it buries itself and it keeps me here on this earth. But when I give it to God, one of those little hooks is now trust. And one of those little hooks is now generosity. And we can choose to say, okay, God, I'm going to give it to you. And I'm going to prove that I trust in you, or I'm going to keep it to myself and I'm going to be greedy and self-reliant. God is saying, what are you going to do with what I give you? Some of you are like, Terry, what happened to the good message? It's still good. It's still good. This is for your good. God's saying, I want to make you more like my son. I want you to trust in me and be generous, because that is who Jesus is. He trusted in the Father when it would seemingly not make sense. And he was generous. For God so loved the world. John 3:16 is not just a banner at a football game. Oh, we don't watch football anymore, right? John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he, participation, gave. Our God is a giver. He wants you and I to give generously, to be like his son and give generously. Why? Because that's who he is. Our God is generous. And here he warns them. He pleads with them, when you go in, don't keep it for yourself. I don't want to spoil the story if you haven't read it, but here goes in chapter 7. In chapter 7. Here, Joshua, this great battle, this great victory of something that didn't make sense, and the walls fall flat, and they walk in just this promise, and then they go to Ai, and it's this little podunk town, right? Gosh, I'm still 39 and I'm using podunk. That's like my dad's word. They go to this little podunk town, and Joshua's like, nah, just send a couple of men in. It's going to be all right. Listen, we see that there's a man named Achan, and he keeps some of these spoils. He keeps some of these garments. He keeps some of this gold and silver, and he keeps it for himself. And the children of Israel, when they go into Ai, they lose that battle. A battle that they should have clearly won because the spirit of self-reliance. Joshua did not seek after the Lord. He did not pray and say, God, how should we get this victory? But they thought, oh, that's nothing. We can take them out. We don't even got to think about it. You know what happens when I don't give to the Lord what is His? See, God has given some of you here, and myself included, these miraculous victories. He's opened up these doors. The walls have come down flat, and He's done things that are just miraculous, and then we fall into something that's like stupid because I'm self-reliant, because I'm keeping what should be God's, and I'm keeping it for myself, and the hooks of greed and self-reliance come in instead of trust and generosity. That's why God is telling them this. See, and it's the tithe. It's for the Lord. Tithing is not a tip for our driver. Tithing is not a tip for our driver. It's trust for my captain. See, I am not a good passenger, but we are not in a car. We are on a ship. We are on a ship in the middle of the ocean, and God says, all aboard who's coming aboard. He is the captain of our salvation. It's not like captain, it's general, that's higher. It's like captain of the ship, like there is no higher than that. He's the captain of the ship, and He says, if you are to trust me in this, Terry, what doesn't make sense? Yeah, you're going to march around, it's not going to make sense. Yeah, you're going to shout for victory before you have victory, it's not going to make sense. And you're going to give me the first of the spoils, and that's not going to make sense. Are you trusting Him with it? Are you trusting our God is generous? He proved it on the cross. Are you trusting Him with it? The worship team is going to come back up. We are going to have a time now of worship and communion. And if ever you think that you cannot trust the Lord, we come to the table. And we realize that, God, you did not withhold anything from me. You did not withhold your Son. You did not withhold your very person. He bled out on the cross. He withheld nothing. My God is generous. He didn't give 10%. He gave all. And He says, are you going to just trust me in that? Are you going to trust me? And let me tell you, I as your pastor, if you come here for a long time, you're like, wow, that's the most you've ever talked about money, ever, and tithing, and it probably is. But I feel that too many of us are losing small battles when God has done great things in our life because of a lack of trust. I'm not asking you to do anything that my family has not decided to do and purpose in our heart that we would do. As your leader and the pastor here, I'm not asking you to do anything that I wouldn't do. I'm saying trust in the Lord and see what He would do with that and see all the other victories you would have with just trust. Just trust. You are on His ship. He is the captain, and He's proved that He loved you when He laid His life down. He's got the scars on His hand for all of eternity. God, we come before You, and we come to this table. We come to this table and we remember Your work, Lord. When You ask us to trust, it's for our own good. When You bring us to a place that doesn't make sense, it's because You're building faith in us. You're making us a people of faith, Lord. You're making us a people of trust. Lord, as we are marching around this world, it seems hopeless from our society to the divide that we have in our nation. And You're calling us still to just walk in faith. Lord, we ask as we come to this table, Your table right now, that we would have Your vision for our country, that we would have Your vision for our society, that we would have Your vision for our trial that looms right in front of us, Lord. Not our vision, but Your vision of victory. When all seemed lost on the cross, You were winning. And so, Lord, give us that vision. Give us your picture. Your word says in Psalm 23 that you prepare a table before us in the presence of our enemy. We have an enemy, Lord. And we're here at your table at this time, in this place right now, to be refreshed, to be filled up as we would come and sit, Lord. And we thank you for the greatest gift that is Jesus Christ. We thank you for your promise of heaven and in your presence forever. We look forward to that day, and so we come to this table in remembrance right now of your great gift. What we're going to do is we're just going to get out of your seat, and this is for believers. This is for the body of Christ, and we're going to come and you're going to